Hello, this is Colette Nies, and this is the latest episode. I believe it's episode 10 with Coffee with Colette. And today we have Jack Olivier here with us, and he is a geologist and he has his MA in geology from UT, Vulcan, and his BA in geology from Trinity University. How are you doing?
Doing fine. Glad to be here.
All right. So a little bit of his background. He's a fellow Texas master naturalist, so that's really near and dear to my heart. And he has 30 years of managerial experience and geotechnical experience in petroleum exploration and production internationally and in the U.S. He's worked for Exxon, Tenneco, and British Gas in various locations here in UK and in Tunisia. And he's currently doing research on the importance of caves in the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone in Comal County. And what we're here to talk about today is caves and water quality and future drinking supply and all things you wanted to know about the aquifer. So welcome.
Thank you.
May I call you Jack?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll make one correction. And
okay.
Everybody does it. Olivier, Jack Olivier.
Olivier, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, no. 30 years of looking for oil and gas. And now I'm really looking for clean, fresh water. And it's not hard to do with the Edwards Aquifer sitting underneath my feet. I do appreciate being invited to talk about it because I think the more people appreciate what's going on with the Edwards Aquifer and how it's a unique resource, they'll become better and more informed voters.
Right.
What we need more of in Comal County especially.
Well, thanks. Well, so how did you get interested in, I know being that I was in, or have been in the energy industry for 15 years, but mine was more land research and not geology, but how did you make that shift into caves in the aquifer? Kind of what led you to there?
Well, I've always been interested in geology and I've always been interested in caves. But when I was looking for a job that would pay me, I went into oil and gas because that's what the industry around here hires geologists to do most of the time.
Right.
But then when I retired and having gone to school both in San Antonio and Austin, I just feel better when I'm sitting on hard rock instead of Houston where I was sitting on mud. Okay. So we moved here in 2015 and did not really come out here intending to do a big study of the recharge zone, but I did appreciate I was moving into the recharge zone. And in fact, I felt a little bit guilty about doing it because when I was in school at Trinity University especially, the head of the department was talking about how important the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone is and that it supplies water. It's the primary supply of water for San Antonio and all the cities along I-35.
It's around 2 million, right?
Over 2 million people. And in the 70s, I'm dating myself now, this professor was saying that we need to protect the Edwards Aquifer to keep the water quality good. Mm-hmm. Well, then I come back to San Antonio and that 2-lane road, 1604 in North San Antonio running through the recharge zone is now a 5 or 4-lane highway. So forget about not developing the recharge zone in Bexar County. And so here I moved into Comal County thinking that being in the recharge zone would protect me from a lot of the industry that I see on I-35.
You live in the recharge zone, is that correct?
Just in the recharge zone, I'm guilty. But, we try to protect it. We have our aerobic septic tanks, and we keep them maintained so that we're not putting any nasties into the San Antonio and New Braunfels drinking water. So moving out here, well, I'll have to mention it then. The reason I got involved in this study was the announcement a couple of years ago of a quarry going in the middle of the recharge zone, something I did not predict. And because I just think it's exactly the wrong thing. I'll show you a road sign here in a minute to show you why I thought it was protected, because it's an environmentally sensitive area.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me cut in real quick. So what study you're talking, so I've read it
Okay.
a couple of times, but what study for the audience are you talking about?
It's the environmental sensitivity of the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone in Comal County.
Okay.
And the most obvious sensitive recharge features are caves, which we know we have in abundance in Comal County. The most famous one, of course, is Natural Bridge Caverns. It's 2.5 miles long, underground. Right next to it is Bracken Bat Cave.
Mm-hmm.
10 million bats spend the summer there delivering babies, baby bats.
Freetail, Mexican freetails, right?
That's right. Yeah, my wife and I are docents for the Bat Cave. But there are lots of other caves that I'll show you here with some maps. They're everywhere. And that's why this is such a recharge area, is that the ground is heavily fractured. There are a lot of caves, and water can flow through these caves and through these fractures very quickly. And through the fault zone, the Balcones fault zone, it goes underground. And in New Braunfels and in San Antonio, it's an artesian resource that when you drill a well, the water wants to come out because it's under pressure from gravity, and it's the water for the 2 million people.
Okay, so I didn't realize this until talking with you. I believe it was a while back, not just recently, but it is that as of 2016, Comal County had 224 known caves, and that there are 22 clusters of caves near the proposed Vulcan site. And that these caves are, it's a database that is put together by a nonprofit called the Texas Speleological Survey. Is that right?
Geological, yeah, it's easier to say TSS.
TSS.
Geological Survey.
Okay.
So you're right. But I will have to warn you though, the database does not include all the caves. These are just the caves where, because most of the caves occur on private property. And the TSS can't get to these caves or to explore for these caves unless they have permission from property owners.
Right.
And that used to be a lot harder thing to do than it is now, for two reasons. One, as Comal County, and we're what, the second fastest growing county in the country, I think, not just the state.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
As these ranches get sold, these are large ranches, 1,000 acres and more, get sold for subdivisions like the one I'm sitting in. Then there's a survey done. It's called a geological survey. And the caves are discovered during the process of this survey, and it's reported to the TCEQ, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Mm-hmm. And if you know how to do it, and that's what I learned to do, you can go to the TCEQ and request copies of these geologic assessments, and they have all the caves located that way. So a lot of my caves I found through the geological assessment process. The TSS, though, they protect the location of the caves to protect property owners from trespassing. And so you'll see on my map, if we get to it, there'll be these clusters, and the TSS will say, okay, well, there are 3 caves in this circle, or there are 5 caves in this circle. They wouldn't give me the exact location. But in a lot of cases, I was able to go to the landowners, especially knowing that I'm in a group that's trying to stop this quarry from going in the middle of the recharge zone. They've allowed us to go in, and I'm not a caver myself. I just am the go-between between the private landowner and the cavers that love to do this for free. That's what they do on their weekends. Mm-hmm. And they'll provide these beautiful maps, and then I can put my report together and try to convince the TCEQ that quarrying in the middle of the recharge zone, especially in the same layer as Natural Bridge Caverns and Bracken Bat Cave, is not good idea environmentally.
So how do they map these? Are they done seismic, or are they really done by hand, or like how do they map?
Just walking the property. They put out a grid pattern, and they just go walking. They go walking looking for holes in the ground, or sinkholes, which are depressions that haven't. The sinkhole there's usually a cave under a sinkhole. It's the roof that's starting to collapse. So if you've been to Natural Bridge Caverns, initially it was just a depression or a sinkhole, but sometime over time, that sinkhole collapsed and it made the natural bridge. That's the opening to Natural Bridge Caverns.
Okay. So for the audience, we're kind of going to be going back and forth. Jack has some slides with some maps and different slides that'll give us more of a visual of what he's talking about.
Geologists can't talk without maps, so sorry about that.
It helps.
Yeah.
Yes.
You want me to try this?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. Let's try that. Okay, can you see that?
I can.
And I try to get that thing off the top there. Okay, so for people that live in New Braunfels and near Landa Park, when you drive up or you drive west and you start climbing that hill, you're actually climbing the Edwards Plateau. And you'll start seeing these green signs that TxDOT has put everywhere, and it says entering the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone. And some of them, like this one, actually go so far as to say environmentally sensitive area. And so I put this as my first slide because people see these signs all the time and probably just ignore them. I just wonder how many people ask themselves, well, why is this environmentally sensitive? And that's what my study has been about, is to try to explain that. Okay. So let me just go to the next slide then and put up a 3D, it's called a karst model. That's a geologic term. Karst means it's the topography that's eroded into a limestone, which is calcium carbonate, a limestone formation. And it forms caves, but sinkholes and very rough terrain, which forms the hill country. Mm-hmm. And most people think two-dimensionally. I like this slide because it's three-dimensional. So as you're driving across this recharge zone, just think that underneath you, you are driving over caves and fractures and sinkholes, like this one over here. If you can see, that's a bunch of fractures. It's collapsing into itself and forms a sinkhole. And all these little fractures in the limestone are conduits for water. And eventually, you know, the dripping causes stalagmites and stalactites that we all like to see in caverns. And I don't really like this slide because it's not so much an underground river as water flowing through a sponge, except in this case, the sponge is fractured limestone with lots of pores and fractures. And then at some place on the edge like this one, think of that as Comel Springs. If you go to Landa Park, you go to that fault escarpment, which is what is like here, water just coming out of the ground there.
Oh.
But as we develop, and we're developing very quickly, I mean, New Braunfels likes to claim that it's the gateway to the hill country, and it is. But as you climb, as you leave New Braunfels, 46, you're starting to see subdivision after subdivision after subdivision. And so these nice rolling hills with cattle in some cases, or just vacant in many cases, are becoming subdivisions. And unfortunately, if we don't stop this, it's going to become a quarry, because there's a large 1,500-acre quarry planned for the intersection of Highway 46 and FM 3009, also known as Natural Bridge Caverns Road. And so if that goes ahead, we're going to be looking at a big hole in the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone.
Correct.
Any questions?
I have so many questions.
So
I guess for how the TCEQ works with the authority to issue water permits in areas that are supposedly environmentally protected or environmentally sensitive, they've allowed for provisions for quarries to not be included, that they don't have to do the same thing. What word am I looking for? They're able to bypass, I guess, some of the regulations.
So the TCEQ is, you can think of it, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, you can think of it as the equivalent of the EPA for Texas. And you would think by the name that there'd be a lot of environmental protection involved. But unfortunately in Texas, it's pretty much a permitting agency. And a lot of the people that work for the TCEQ will admit it. They're there to permit. But part of the permitting process for land development over the recharge zone requires this geologic assessment that I mentioned. And for subdivisions, it's probably pretty effective. I mean, before land is developed as a subdivision, there's this geologic assessment. They identify the major holes in the ground, the caves. And if it's rated to be sensitive, and we can go through that process, but it's kind of boring, it has to have an infiltration rate that they estimate to be significant. And they give it a grade. If it's greater than 40, it needs to be protected. If it's less, it's not. If an opening, mostly a cave or a sinkhole, is known to allow water to go into the ground for recharge, then it will be protected by drawing a 50-foot radius around that opening that cannot be developed.
Like a buffer.
A buffer. And the reason for the buffer is as water is flowing toward this hole, before it goes in, it has to flow through some natural vegetation, and some filtration occurs and sediments get deposited. Hopefully the grasses remove any.
50 feet is not much.
It's not much. And we all know that in the Edwards recharge zone, there's not a lot of soil either. And there's not a lot of grass.
No, I mean, you can't grow anything out there, really. I mean.
So 50 feet, better than nothing. It prevents people from building a house on one and then watching their house collapse. So it protects a little bit from that. But as you mentioned, quarries get a big exemption. The TCEQ requires the quarry operators to protect these caves until they remove them. So you have to protect them until you destroy them.
Well, wouldn't that make you just want to destroy them first so you don't have to bother with everything?
Yes, and I think there's kind of that going on. You know, a quarry operator really doesn't want to run into a cave. That's just a problem for them. They want solid rock. They don't want a bunch of holes in their quarry.
Right. I mean, it's more money too. I mean, that's more actual
right
limestone that they get, right? So. But
when they hit a significant cave, and then we have to talk about what's significant, right? Then they're supposed to report it to the TCEQ, and the TCEQ comes out and they decide if there's anything that can be done, if it needs to be shut, sealed off, or if it, or are they just going to go ahead and destroy it? So that's something that they don't want, that's just more work for the quarry operators. So that's not something they really want. But to get to your question about water permits then, for subdivisions, it's pretty much a water permit that's required because they have to protect the recharge zone. They also have to demonstrate there's enough water there for the people they're going to be bringing in as residents of the development. But a quarry operator goes through a different process because they employ rock crushing. They put out a lot of dust, and so for a quarry to get permitted, they have to go through an air permit process first. And that's what's happened with this quarry that I'm talking about. It's called the Vulcan 3009 quarry. They have been given a permit through a contested case process that we went through. We're actually in the process of suing the TCEQ. We'll see how far that goes. Mm-hmm. But the quarry operator, Vulcan in this case, has to get a water permit. And that's what my study is all about, is to show the TCEQ it's a sensitive area. You really should not be quarrying in the recharge zone.
Okay, so
what box?
So what are the caves? Why are the caves so important in the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone?
Well, they're the biggest.
What types of caves are there? Because I know there's a varied. So if you want to use some of your slides, that'd be great.
Okay, let's do that. Yeah, well, the caves are definition of a cave is a hole in the ground that's big enough for a human to crawl into. Anything smaller than that, it's not a cave. Water can flow there, it doesn't care how big the hole is. But a cave is such a big hole, people realize that it's a big conduit for water. And in fact, in the bottom of natural bridge caverns and a lot of these other caves, you'll see a stream flowing at the bottom of it. Okay. Let me get to the share again. And let me go to the next slide.
And whenever, this is a side tangent, it is anytime that you have a spring where fresh water is coming out, Does it automatically mean there's a cave nearby? Or it may just be a fracture or something?
It may just be a fracture, but what I've learned is there are caves everywhere, so they are not rare.
Okay.
They're everywhere. This is a map of the Edwards Aquifer region. It's put out by the Edwards Aquifer Authority, and I like them because they actually do science, more so than this other agency we've been talking about.
The permitting agency.
Yes, the permitting agency. So they do have scientists that work there. Their primary mission was, they actually were implemented by an EPA action in 1993 to protect the endangered species in Landa Park, believe it or not. Because in the mid-50s, the Edwards Aquifer was drawn down during a drought so low that the springs quit flowing altogether and everything in the springs died. So after the drought ended in the mid-50s, San Antonio in particular, because that was the big center of population, realized something needed to be done to control the discharge. And the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone was formed by an action in 1993. The state of Texas, I believe, sued to prevent that from happening, but in 1996 it was enacted, and that was the beginning of the Edwards Aquifer Authority. And getting back to the map then, this is a natural resource which is rare in the world, and we're lucky to have it here because all the major cities in Texas in our area are directly here because of the recharge zone. Let's talk about those cities. We're here in New Braunfels, and you see that we're on the edge of the blue right there. San Antonio, Uvalde, Brackettville, and in the northern direction, San Marcos, and then even farther north is Austin. And they're located there because that's where the springs are located. And that's where the water in the Edwards Aquifer is leaking from the aquifer and coming out in the form of springs. And the Comal Springs is the biggest leak in the Edwards Aquifer. That has the most discharge in back to southwestern United States.
Wow.
The second largest one is San Marcos, the San Marcos Springs. I used to know it as Aquarina Springs when it used to be
right.
A tourist destination. Now it's run by the Texas State University. And the third largest springs is actually Waco Springs, which is on River Road. They're going to Canyon Lake. So the three biggest springs are in our area between New Braunfels and San Marcos. Well, so you look at the area, there are like, I think 13 counties. I don't know how many acres that is, but it's big. And what it is one of nature's biggest rain collection systems. And water falling in this green area, and it's called drainage area on this map, but I call it the contributing zone. Water falling there flows towards the blue ribbon, which is the recharge zone. So it's 180 miles from Brackettville to Kyle, north of San Marcos. So the recharge zone is 180 miles long, but it's only 5 to 10 miles wide. And that is where the water goes into the ground through faults that are known as the Balcones Fault Zone. And then it goes underground, and in this orange area, it's in the Edwards Aquifer, but it's underground, and the city of San Antonio and people in this orange area drill holes to get the water out of the ground. And it's all Edwards, and it all comes from the green and blue areas.
Okay. So the artesian zone is supplied by
gravity feed, natural gravity feed. I think of it as a rain collection system you might have on your roof. So the green area is your roof. The blue area is the piping, the pipes that get it from your roof into your tank. And the artesian aquifer, this orange area, that's the tank. So the water goes in the green, it flows down into the tank through the blue area, and then we drill for it and get it out as well water.
So where on here would, if this one's the Edwards, where would the Trinity be? The Trinity Aquifer?
Okay, well, let me go to the next slide. So I'm going to show you across. So what we're looking at is a map view. We're looking down on the surface. I'm going to take a slice through this, kind of north-south slice.
Okay.
Okay, so that contributing zone is here on the northern side on the left of this cross-section. And you'll see this is called the Edwards Plateau, and that yellow is actually the Edwards limestone. and that then is eroded in this spot. And then you see it, the yellow in here, where the Edwards is on the surface again.
Correct.
This is the recharge zone. This is where the Edwards is exposed on the surface, and it's very fractured by this, what's called the Vulcan's fault zone. So the water makes its way down through fractures and caves, and then it leaks out right here. This would be the Comel Springs. But the water that continues on down ends up down in here in the artesian zone. And so here's a well into the artesian zone. You can imagine that's the J17 well in San Antonio, the one that's used to gauge how full the tank is.
Okay. So it's basically the recharge zone is there because it's highly exposed.
It is exposed, it's porous and permeable, and I forgot to mention, right below the Edwards, it's an older formation called the Glen Rose, but it's commonly known, it's called the Trinity Group, and so the aquifers in this group are called the Trinity Aquifers.
Okay. Right.
The Trinity Aquifers they're a decent aquifer. I get my water from the Trinity, but they're not nearly as good as the Edwards. They're not as porous and permeable. They don't recharge as fast. And so if you live where I do, which is either here or on the recharge zone, you have to get your water from the Trinity because the Edwards is either not present or it's in the recharge zone and the water is just sinking into the ground.
Does that mean it's just too deep?
It's just that the water table is not high enough because the water is actually sinking.
Okay.
But here the tank is full and it's actually under gravity pressure. And in the old days, and I've read about this, there was a catfish farm in San Antonio and a guy drilled a terrific well. He must have drilled one into a big permeable, porous and permeable area. The water was just gushing out of the ground. And they had to go to that guy and force him to shut it down because he was drawing down the aquifer, just that well was drawing it down. Yeah. If it gets drawn down low enough, maybe I should bring that up here.
So does it water, if you tap it correctly, would do the same thing that oil does?
Yeah. Yeah, they're both fluids.
Okay.
Yeah. So my petroleum business, the only difference is viscosity and price.
It takes a lot more to drill for oil. Well,
Although, and I think it's probably true now, if you want to buy a gallon of distilled water, what does that cost? A gallon of distilled water?
yeah, probably
Buck?
$1 something.
Yeah, a gallon of gasoline costs about the same, or it's amazing. Water can be pretty expensive. People need it. It's something we can't live without.
Right. And it's a dwindling resource, it seems.
Exactly.
So you were talking about, okay, so this is I'm pointing, but you can't see the J17 well, and you were saying that this is the one that they check every day to see where our water restrictions come from.
So if you live in New Braunfels, New Braunfels used to be 100% dependent on Edwards Aquifer wells. I think their oldest well is at the headwaters. If you've been out there, it's now kind of a protected area. They have other wells all around. They also get some of their water now from Canyon Lake. But a lot of the water that NBU sells is Edwards water.
Okay.
And the Edwards aquifer, basically the tank is measured by a well that's been monitored for a long, long time. It's called the J17. It's the well at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, North San Antonio. And so when the water level in the J17 well falls to 660 feet, and this is measured above sea level, so 660 feet above sea level, when the Edwards Aquifer level falls below that, then you start going into water restriction stages. And I checked today, the J17 well.
Back? Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. Can we switch back to us?
Yes, thank you.
He's got the shared screen.
There we
Okay.
go. Yeah, so right now, I checked this morning, the J17 well's at 655, so it's dropped below 660.
So we're at stage 2, that would be, right? Is that?
I think, well, maybe it is. I thought it was maybe it is stage 2. Yes.
So if
And
it's below 660 is stage one. I'm asking. I don't have that chart right.
I'm in the Trinity. We don't have those things. So we're in stage one and at the Trinity Aquifer, and we can water our yard twice a week. And I think in the Edwards Aquifer, you can only water your yard once a week, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I thought that below 660 was stage one, but I could be wrong. I'm not a stage expert in the Edwards. I do know that when the water falls another 5 feet and gets below 650, then you'll be in the next stage, either stage 2 or stage 3, whatever.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I was going, okay. Yeah. Okay. I was doing from as long as it was below that, there's a whole nother 10 feet there. Okay.
And so then your restrictions get more severe. And then if it goes down to lower than 640, and I don't know how often that's happened. I don't think it's happened recently, but when it drops below 640, then it's very serious. And so farmers are told they can't irrigate as much. They get charged more for every gallon they produce. And that probably impacts residents as well, the price.
So I'm going to ask a question. You may know this, you may not, and that's okay, because I didn't. How does NBU have legal access to get and sell all the water?
I think they have a permit, and they may actually be grandfathered, because just like the Edwards has the Edwards Aquifer Authority to help regulate, Comal County a couple of years ago, and we're one of the last counties actually in our area, we got our own, it's called a groundwater conservation district. So we have now what's called the Comal Trinity Groundwater Conservation District. And actually, NBU gets most of its water through the Edwards, so they probably have a permit with the EAA.
Okay.
But where I live, the Comal Trinity Groundwater Conservation District is only now getting organized, and they're looking at wells to see which ones they're going to count as their monitor wells. And they're not planning to do any water restrictions. They're just going to measure the withdrawal. And if you're a commercial producer that produces, I think above 10,000, I don't know what the exact number, then there'll be I think they call it a fee, a tax essentially. And there'll be a fee for, every gallon produced. But there is no provision that I know of for actually telling people to stop.
Okay, because I know that there's a lot of people, their bills went up this month, but I know it's hotter. It's really hot, but the water part is what went up. But I know that there's zero competition. So, and I know that GVC is exploding in growth, but it's run like a co-op. Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked that way. So let's get back to caves.
Okay, because I'm not an expert on these groundwater conservation districts.
Okay.
Let's talk about caves. I think I have a slide here that I want to share with you.
Okay.
Let's do that again here. Because everybody loves caves. Before I do that though, let me show you one more thing, because people don't realize this, and we talked about it earlier. So here's the contributing zone, and that narrow blue zone is where the water's going in. So once it goes in the ground, out of sight, out of mind, where does it go? Well, according to the EAA, this is a general aquifer flow path. And these are guesstimates, because to find out exactly where the water goes, you'd have to do some dye trace studies, and those haven't been done very much. But anyway, this is how they're modeling the Edwards Aquifer. They use these blue lines to show once the water goes into the recharge zone, this is where it flows. And when I moved out here, and here's Comal County, and there's Canyon Lake, I just assumed the water was flowing south.
Right. Yeah.
Well, it does in Bear County, pretty much. Okay, so the water there is flowing south, southeast, and to Bear County. But the water farther west, a lot of it, when it goes in the ground, starts to go almost east-west to Bear County.
Is that just because the elevation is going down toward the coast, or what?
It's related to elevation. It's the water head. Water wants to flow from high pressure to lower pressure. So it's kind of flowing downhill. It's going from high pressure to low pressure.
But this at Comal looks like it's going northeast.
Yes. So I think people realize that for a long, long time, the people in Bexar County have been paying an 1/8 cent sales tax, and the EAA has been using it to purchase conservation easements to protect the land over the recharge zone from being developed so the water doesn't get polluted.
Right.
It's been a pretty effective program. Unfortunately, the mayor, who I like him, but he's proposed to take that tax and put it toward via bus, the bus system. I'm not too keen on that, but I don't live there, so I don't have any say. But to get to your answer, or to your question, a lot of people think that, well, Bexar County's got it under control. The EAA is protecting our water. In Comal County, the world changes across Cibolo Creek. This is the Cibolo Creek between Bexar County and Comal County. And the water goes from north south to now due east.
And Cibolo Creek is the dividing line for Comal and Bexar,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah, that's that wiggly line, Cibolo Creek. Natural Bridge Caverns is right below that funny looking bend. It looks like a hand to me. That's where Natural Bridge Caverns is, right there along, not far from Cibolo Creek, actually. So the water in Comal County is not being protected by Bexar County. It's flowing east toward the springs in Landa Park, where NBU gets a lot of its water. And when the level of the Edwards Aquifer is high enough, it actually goes over a hump and goes all the way up into Hayes County and the springs there, San Marcos Springs. So nobody's looking after our water in Comal County.
So what happens here greatly affects Hayes as well.
Yes, and as we talked about, the county that really was the most environmentally sensitive was actually Travis County, where Austin is located. And it started with protecting Barton Springs, their Edwards Aquifer Springs. And they realized over time that the water coming out at Barton Springs, some of it's coming from Hayes County. So they started conserving land, and they're actually conserving some of the land on the northeastern edge of Hayes County.
Right.
Hayes County is actually starting to protect some of their own acreage to protect their spring.
Yeah, if I get elected, excuse me, I should say when I get elected, what I would like to do is mimic what Hayes has done with a conservation committee that they've put together to really look at properties and land, private and publicly, to start really conserving and protecting land for the amount of growth that we have. And one of them is the Cedillo Springs property, that 5 acres that's near Fisher Park. That would be and SEMA project would be also just boom right there. Those are 2 no-brainers.
SEMA is a large area that was owned by the Boy Scouts of America. Mm-hmm. And I guess financial reasons forced them to sell it.
Right.
5 pieces, I believe, excuse me. And one or two pieces was purchased by Hayes County to protect it along the Blanco River there.
Correct.
I applaud that. And I think there was a proposal made by another county commissioner to consider that Comal County would buy one of those plots of land, but that was voted down.
That was Lon Shell, I think, it was commissioner for Precinct 3 in Hayes, right, that put that together.
I don't know the Hayes County commissioners. I just know that. And
they did a public bond hearing on it, and it got passed, and it was like boom, boom, boom. I mean, they really took initiative, because that's a huge piece of land right on the Blanco River that is just, I mean, you have to look toward the future. I mean, if our county's the 2nd fastest growing in the entire nation, and we're already crowded now, and then you look at Landa Park and Fisher Park and the lake with their boat ramp situation, I mean, you have to look, well, what's it going to look like when New Braunfels itself is 250,000 people, not to mention the rest of the county. I mean, that you have to have other places to go. And I don't want to make it only about people, because there's a whole other aspect of native species and flood control and protecting the environment as well.
Well, I'll make my pitch for you. Our commissioners basically voted it down. And my commissioner, name will go nameless, said that the commissioners have no tools in their toolbox.
I hear that a
Well,
lot. The tools in the
well, maybe in Comal County things are different, but in Hays County, they're getting stuff done. And my question is, why aren't we doing something? Because like you said, we have land to park, and that's great. I'm very happy that that's been protected. We also have Guadalupe State Park on the western edge. But in between, well, there's Canyon Lake, so I get we benefit from that also. But in between, what's been all these natural large ranches that we've all benefited from, you know, they haven't polluted the water. They're pretty good stewards of the land generally.
Mm-hmm.
But once all this is developed, where is going to be the open space in Comal County?
Right.
If we don't do anything now, there's not going to be any. So I'm supporting everybody that is going to help fix that problem. And I hope that you are able to do that.
I'd love to be able to do that.
Okay.
Back to caves.
Everybody loves caves. So this cave project, they're everywhere, okay? But I focused on the caves right around the quarry because I wanted to show to the TCEQ that they need to look beyond the boundaries of the 1,500 acre site. And that's all they ever do is look at the site.
Mm-hmm.
That boundary is fixed. But these caves, well, Natural Bridge, I said it's 2.5 miles long.
Right.
These caves, you know, they go beyond boundaries. They don't care where the property lines are. So I started looking for caves as close to the quarry site as possible. And this one is 1,000 feet from the boundary. It's a nice little cave. It goes in 2 directions. We weren't able to explore it because the vultures are using it to raise their babies. And we haven't gone back to explore how far it goes. But it's a close one. Let me show you double decker though. This one is farther south. It's 1 mile from the quarry boundary. And this is a mini Natural Bridge Caverns. And you know, Natural Bridge was last summer, they reported that they extended that cave quite a bit, and they haven't even reached the end yet. And it's heading north. This one's heading south. So you know, there's a chance one day we'll realize that these caves are all interconnected. Anyway, here's a nice picture.
I have to ask an amateur question because I don't remember this back in school or when I went to caves. Do these are those stalagmites from the bottom?
The tights hang tight from the ceiling, and the mites are mighty.
Does this dictate age, or is that just precipitation?
Okay. So when water falls through the air, it picks up some CO2. The CO2 in the water makes it slightly acidic, carbonic acid. Very slight, you know, nothing to worry about. But it's enough that it actually dissolves the limestone at the surface. And that's why there are holes in it, and you know, it's really rough in places. Looks like what do you call it? Igneous rock, a lava flow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, if you can see this, it might be hard to see. Do you see there's a little stalactites hanging in a straight line right there?
Uh-huh.
That's a fracture. And the water is seeping through the fracture. It's got dissolved calcium carbonate in it. It hits the void. And at one time, the water table was high enough. This was all underwater. But as the streams cut down deeper, like Cibolo Creek, for example, the water level is flowing. Now these caves that used to be completely filled with water are now, some of them are dry, like this one. But as the water flows through this fracture and the water starts to evaporate, the calcium carbonate, calcite, gets deposited, forming these stalactites. And then when there's a good tight that's dripping on a single spot, it builds up the stalagmite. And then eventually these two will come together and form a column. But they're limestone that has been dissolved at the surface and is getting reprecipitated. And so eventually, you know, this could be filled in, but we won't see it.
Okay.
We won't be around to see it. Anyway, let me show you what it looks like then, because I think this is let's see if I can do that. Can you see the cave map?
I can.
Okay, so it's a very small opening. So here's the surface around a bunch of ash juniper trees growing next to this small opening, and you have to rappel. That's why I don't do it. You have to rappel to get down into it. This is double decker. It's right along 1863.
It's huge.
between that, 1,100 feet in one direction and over 100 feet in the vertical direction. Oh, I don't want to get nerdy on the geology, but there's actually two levels. That's why it's double decker. And they're in different geological layers, okay?
Okay.
And they start off vertical because they're in the dolomitic layer, which is very dense. And the shallow caves in this area tend to be vertical. And then when they get deeper, and maybe even as deep as the Glen Rose, they start to open up and become more horizontal. And so this cave is—
So dolomite, is that because it's calcium carbonate? Is that right? Or?
Calcium carbonate, and then you throw in a little magnesium, and it becomes dolomite.
Okay.
So
I make my own toothpaste, and I use dolomite in part of it.
It's more crystalline. It's a little harder, I think. So, but they're both carbonates. So the cave had been mapped by somebody at University of Texas doing a PhD, and that's how I knew where it was based on that study. But the cave had not been mapped using modern technology. And so these cavers, Ben Hutchins was the lead caver from Texas State, organized these crews. And they came in here and mapped. This is the cave that was known before the exploration study. And so they dropped in here and they mapped all these layers. And then the colored area is a new chamber, or a series of chambers, that was discovered a year ago last June. So this was a new discovery that was made, and it's called Disappointment Maze. You said you liked the name. We let the owner of the property, Faith Room.
Disappointment Maze.
Yeah. Well, Guano Room, you can understand why they named it Guano Room, because that's where the opening is, and bats live in these, right? Most of them are bracken bat cave, but some of them live here. And before I get off of this, you see the little blue bit over there. There's actually a flowing water down here at the bottom of this one.
Okay. And where exactly is this one, the double-decker cave, located in Kamau?
If I tell you exactly, I'll have to kill you.
Oh, because it's right, because they don't want people going down in there, right?
But it's off 1863, west of 3009, and north of Natural Bridge Caverns. Let me show you the cross section. If you want to go to the cross section now?
Sure, that'll be good.
Okay. I hope everybody finds this interesting. So this is a stratigraphic cross section. What that means is that it's hung on a geologic formation, and I'm not worried about the faults, because the faulting just makes things busy. Okay, so I'm ignoring the faults. I'm just hanging it on the base of the Edwards and the top of the Glen Rose, which is the straight line. Okay, and these formations were deposited in shallow marine seas 100 million years ago. We see dinosaur footprints in them. Now, at Canyon Lake on the gorge tour, you'll see, dinosaur footprints. Anyway, these were deposited in shallow waters and as calcium carbonate. And so Bracken Bat Cave and Natural Bridge Caverns are formed inside these little boxes, these blank boxes. So you can see the Bat Cave, and this one's filled, this is all guano, this is bat poop. Okay, they've never explored below that because there's too much bat poop. I mean, it's poisonous.
I think they said it was like, it was just a matter of minutes that it would completely disintegrate.
So strong, and there's not enough oxygen. You have to wear a mask. The Natural Bridge Caverns occurs below this dense dolomitic zone. This is the bridge at Natural Bridge. You go into the base of the Edwards Formation, then you get into the Glen Rose, and things really open up in the Glen Rose. So you can see that they're different levels. And here there are 3 levels, right? Double decker, we only know of 2 levels, but I tell you, I think we do enough exploration, we're going to find at least 1 more level than double decker. So before I leave this, and here's where the map is going. It's going from south to north. So there's Bracken, Natural Bridge, double decker along 1863. The red outline is the 1,500 acre quarry that's proposed. So it's pretty big. It's all in the recharge zone. And this last blue dot is the well that was drilled for the quarry. And in the process of drilling, they lost circulation in this zone, which I call the cave prone zone. So meaning when they were drilling it, they were blowing air in to blow the cuttings, the rock chips out of the hole. And then when they hit this level right here, nothing came out anymore. The air and the chips were going somewhere else. So I'm not going to tell you that I know this is a cave, but what I can say is that the air found it easier to go somewhere else than to come back out. So there's porosity and permeability there. It's a 70-foot zone, and it correlates right with where you would expect the cave could be.
Okay.
So when you start digging around up in here, you could run into some caves like this. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah. So, and I've asked this before, but I kind of want to bring it back. So, kind of restate how important the caves are to the aquifer recharge zone.
Yeah. Let me just go back to this slide that might make it easier.
Okay.
Okay, so we have the Edwards at the surface. That's where you saw the cave openings, like natural bridge caverns. This is kind of schematic, but the blue or the light blue and the dark blue just shows the holes that are filled with water, can be filled or flowing water. And they're the conduit for the surface water to get into the Edwards Aquifer so people can use it for the drinking water. Primarily in San Antonio. And the caves are some of the most visible or detectable conduits for water to get into the aquifer.
Right. But you had said, and there was that, what was it, the Dino Noble plant in January of 2000?
Okay.
Where it doesn't always have to be a cave or something visible, that these fractures, didn't you have a map of one that had?
Yeah, so the flaw in the whole system that TCEQ uses is they have this rating process, and a cave gets a score of 30, and if there's evidence of water going in, it gets another score, and if it gets above 40, it has to be protected. If it's not above 40, it's not protected.
Okay.
We don't know exactly where the water goes unless it's been tested by dye tracing. But dye tracing takes a long time, it's very expensive, and it's not been done a lot except in northern Bexar County. So you bring up something that acts just like a dye trace, and that was a diesel spill. Let me find that slide. Okay, in January 2000, near the Cemex quarry south of New Braunfels along Interstate 35, it's one of the bigger quarries down there. There are subdivisions that are right up against it too. They had this tank was holding diesel fuel, and they were mixing the diesel fuel with ammonium nitrate, which is basically fertilizer. It's the thing that blew up in Beirut, Lebanon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a big explosive.
And that was also at, was it Texas City?
Yeah, well, even in Waco, I think that was an ammonia plant.
Right.
West Texas.
What they used on, that was also what was used on
yes,
in Oklahoma City bombing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a major explosive. Doesn't cost much to obtain, unfortunately. So it's a good explosive of choice. That's what's used in the quarries for blasting. Anyway, this Dyna Nobel plant was mixing the diesel with the ammonium nitrate and making the explosive for the quarry operators. Over the weekend, a valve was left open in this area, and as you pointed out, this was a TCEQ approved area. No sensitive features identified. Over the weekend, 2,000 gallons of diesel spilled, and they came back on Monday morning, 2,000 gallons, and they knew pretty much how much it spilled because they could measure what was left in the tank. Had gone into the ground. No sensitive features identified on the surface, and yet the diesel would travel 4.5 miles along this red arrow, 4.5 miles in 5 days, and was detected coming out of the Comel Springs in Landon Park. So it traveled 1 mile per day, and it didn't go in a straight line. It follows fractures, and it goes every which way. But this proved by the spill that area of the recharge zone is connected to the springs. And it was also proven to be connected to the Waco Springs on River Road. it traveled 6.5 miles in 3 days. It
In
went
this
farther.
in this particular quarry or plant it's right on the edge of the recharge zone, right? Like, because it's closer to 35. Like,
Yeah,
it's
okay. So here's
yeah.
35. And I'm going to confuse you because now the recharge zone is the purple. It's not blue anymore.
Okay.
But there's I-35, the highway. There's a transition zone where the water can go in, or it doesn't have to. It's kind of complicated there. But in the purple area, this is the edge of the recharge zone. And the quarry we're talking about, you can kind of see the outline on this satellite map. This white area, that's the Cemex plant. And so the explosive was being made here, and it flowed to the springs in Landa Park. But we call this Quarry Road. This is the quarry at Hunter, just on the edge there as you go to the outlet malls. This is a Hanson quarry, I think, here. This is the Vulcan quarry on 1604 in San Antonio. So these quarries have been there for over 50 years. And as I told you earlier, we need oil and gas. That's why I spent my career looking for it. We also need crushed rock. You need a lot of crushed rock for building materials in San Antonio and for our homes here. A lot of it gets exported on rail lines. So if you're going to quarry the Edwards Aquifer or the Edwards Formation, this is where they've been, and so they've done a.
Well, and it makes logical sense because it's near a highway and it's near a railroad.
It does.
You could transport it fairly easily.
Well, the quarry at 1604, this is the Vulcan quarry, it's pretty much quarried out. They've actually, although they won't admit it, they've actually penetrated the water level. They're not supposed to, but I think they did, because there's a lake there now. Well, so they've been looking for another place to go, Colette. And so this is the quarry that we're working to prevent. It's called the Vulcan Quarry. This is 46 coming out of New Braunfels, the gateway to the hill country right here. Here's my subdivision right here. This is Vintage Oaks. This is Copper Ridge. This is the 3009 road that leads to the Natural Bridge Caverns at the bend right here. This is Natural Bridge Caverns. And this is where they want to quarry. And I just think, I'm not against quarrying.
Yeah, I don't think, everybody that I've met, it's not about not being against quarries, that it's about where this one specifically is located.
And as I mentioned, if the TCEQ, and it's in the process of approving it, if Vulcan gets the approval to quarry here, then you're just going to see all these other quarry operators and new ones come in, and they'll start popping them in just anywhere in this purple zone. So there goes your hill country.
And you also need to look at who, most of the time, I think 4 out of the last 5, I could be wrong on that. That might be from old data. The executive director or the head of the TCEQ for the last 4 out of 5, mind you, I think that stat is from 2010. Their next job has been as a lobbyist for the aggregate industry. So they're so closely in bed together. And then you look at our state representatives or our commissioners that take large sums of money from the aggregate industry and then specifically do not vote on things, or they don't pass specific hearings to stop the permitting process. So, if people don't think that there's some corruption going on or that people aren't getting paid, you're sadly mistaken. That's
We
just my
like to
opinion,
call it,
but it's also in
we don't call it corruption. We just
follow the money.
benefits, just special benefits. Okay?
Right.
In this, the problem goes all the way to the top. We need you at the commissioner level to try to do something at the county level, but we need the governor, the lieutenant governor, to fix the problem too, because the TCEQ will tell you they're just following the rules that they were given.
Right.
Okay. A lot of the people don't agree with the rules.
And the state has undermined local control in some ways, but the county can still do stuff. They still can they could slow it down. There's been other counties that have been very successful in kneecapping certain aggregate operations and getting them moved. So, and they're, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you go ahead.
Well, and one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and this is part of what I'm studying in my doctoral program, is in the aspect of land justice and food justice, is reclamation of land. And what do you do? What I think that there's no mention right now for inspection and maintenance after a quarry is abandoned, nor, and this is according to your study, either for no mention for any need for land reclamation. And this is a huge area of opportunity where land, now it would take a while, but land could be healed. And you also have to look into mitigation credits that could be used that aren't being used to establish a green space after this land has pretty much been destroyed to begin to heal it.
Yeah, reclamation. It's done, I think, in the 46 out of the 50 states. It's being,
right.
Quarries have to reclaim in almost all the other states, but Texas is one of just a handful that does not.
I mean, even oil and gas has to reclaim and heal. I mean, and that really depends on how savvy the landowner is in negotiating and demanding their rights. But it's doable. And so for the aggregate industry to be left out of that process or not held to any standard is.
Here's what the quarry operators say, and this is what they'll tell you as well. Okay, quarries provide jobs. Mm-hmm. Well, the Vulcan quarry will probably employ 15 people to run the plant. The other jobs are independent drivers that are running trucks up and down the freeways, hauling the stuff around. Right. They're not the best jobs in the world. Imagine, though, a subdivision, if you're going to develop it, a subdivision like mine is a 1 acre spacing, 10% impervious cover. We haven't talked about impervious cover, but on a 1 acre spacing, if everybody's house lot in the recharge zone is 1 acre, then 10% of it's impervious cover, which isn't the worst in the world, 10%. Once you get to the newer subdivisions, the one down the road, you're talking about 50% impervious cover. I mean, now we're covering over the surface.
Yeah.
And then all the discharge is going to be flashing. It's going to be more flooding because there's less ground to sink into. It's going to be carrying all the contaminants and going into what remain, the openings that remain. So we're just making it worse.
And then you kind of vary between, because we are in an area, being at the kind of open end of the hill country where we kind of go back and forth between flood and drought, flood and drought, flood and drought. And this is why, part of what I'm beginning to learn more about, but kind of more my education has been more in like healing land that's been like agricultural land, but where we are, there's not really a lot of agricultural land. So that implementing green infrastructure with new building and kind of setting up, I mean, I don't think the county can do something super specific on implementing, like you can't on zoning, but they can promote building in a way that they could speed the process of people use green infrastructure. In other words, have more native land, limit the lot sizes, can't be just crammed right all next to each other. The water systems have to be, there's so many things that could be done on a county level to slow down this massive overdevelopment as well.
There's also, and I'll give a pitch to the CCCA, which I know you're a member of, the Comal County Conservation Alliance. They're working to try to convince big landowners that have environmental concerns to put their acreage in conservation easements voluntarily. Okay. That would be another way, without the county having to spend the money to buy the properties, that there would be, they would purchase the development rights only, not all the land. And the land would be set aside to protect the environment, like they're doing or have been doing in San Antonio and Bexar County.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's another option that could be done. But I think New Braunfels is kind of at a crossroads. We're growing so fast now. Thankfully, we still have some of that small town feel,
Right.
but we have to be careful not to become just another suburb of San Antonio. That's what my concern. And you do have the strip right along the highway, the Quarry Road strip, which is mostly commercial. Okay. And then you have the other bit with Slitterbahn and the park and Canyon Lake and tubing down the Guadalupe River, which is touristic.
Right.
So how are we going to be a tourist destination? We don't control some of this commercialization that's going on.
And when you have, the aggregate industry that owns 7.5 to 8% of our county.
John Abraham will be your next speaker. He's the expert on that. 7 to 8% of the land's already been purchased by.
And you can't. When you look 20 years into the future, you can't be a county that revolves around natural resources. And when I mean natural resources, I mean water activities and the kind of beautiful, pristine area that so many people here enjoy, and being tourism, and also be an aggregate conglomerate. At some point, there's going to be a breaking point where you can't do both. And right now we can, because it's along 35.
And it's not just quarries. The developments are a problem too. And we have to maintain septic tanks. Otherwise, we're polluting it with septic effluent. We don't want that. We talked earlier about, these permits are coming through right and left almost every week or every other week. And the one that was in the Herald's Lifetime this weekend was for 500,000 gallons of treated wastewater going into the Guadalupe River in Green, which is tubing heaven. Yeah. And I'm not sure I want to get into that river knowing that our effluent is going in there. Anyway, the solution to pollution is dilution, but at some point it's going to become a problem. And,
right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'll ask you a couple more questions and then we can wrap up, because I know that I could talk to you for a lot longer. So at one point we were talking about the dry creek and how important that comes into play. By its name, it's dry part of the time. How does that come into play with the water system here, or should I say more? I don't know.
The reason why it's dry like today is because we're in a drought. But even when we're not in a drought, even Cibolo Creek, which is a major stream, the water, almost 100% of it's going underground. So you'll see places in Cibolo Creek that hardly ever have any flowing water at the surface. It's down on the ground somewhere. Okay. So just the fact that it's dry doesn't mean it's not a water recharge feature. It really is an important water recharge feature. And when developments go in, or I consider quarries to be funnels into the recharge zone. I mean, anything that's going to go into a quarry when it's a flood stage, and you can't tell me that you can prevent water from, 10 inches of rain in the hill country, it's going to go where it wants to go, whether there's a 2-foot berm or, built or not. So it's a funnel into the recharge zone.
And that funnels the diesel, the pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, everything that is in the sewer effluent from the areas around, just kind of this is why it's so important.
In a karst aquifer or an aquifer in limestone, it's a great water distribution feature, but it's not good at filtration, not like a sandstone aquifer.
Is that because it's so fast, it doesn't have time?
The pores are just so big that there's nothing filtering. If there's no grass at the surface to filter, then whatever goes in the ground is just flowing through it. And so it's not good at filtration at all. So what goes in is going to come out.
The positive is it fills up fast. But the negative is there's no filtration system that happens
No.
That normally would happen in slower ones that can kind of take some of those pollutants out.
And like most problems, it's a lot cheaper to avoid having the problem, avoid polluting the aquifer, than having to then treat the water after it is polluted. So, you know, I think
But protecting our aquifer is not only the right thing to ethically do and to protect our drinking water, but it's also fiscally responsible in the long run, right?
And so it's important for people in your district, in all districts or precincts in Comal County, to elect commissioners that believe in the environment and the importance of water, so we can start fixing what's needed to be fixed. Because there are tools in your toolbox. You might need more tools in your toolbox. That will require input from Austin. And we're trying to work with our legislators to, in fact, there's a group, this is another problem that we've had. These environmental groups like ours, like Preserve Our Hill Country Environment, the one that we formed, we're small groups. We're all, you know, volunteers. We didn't study this a lot of times in school. We're just doing this because we see a problem. But a little group like ours, you know, fighting a big industry, and then an industry that's supported by our politicians and the regulations, it's an impossible task. So we have formed what's called TRAM, Texas for Responsible Aggregate Mining. And I don't know how many groups we're up to now, but all our little groups now are starting to form together under the help of the Hill Country Alliance based in Austin. So that we, as a much larger group, can get the ear of our legislators.
And it's so needed. I mean, there's literally hardly any regulation whatsoever of the aggregate industry. I mean, if you have people that get up in arms about oil and gas and petroleum, that has way more than the aggregate industry. And not to say that we don't need oil and gas or we don't need quarries, because we do. It's just they need to, there needs to be some separation between business and environment at some point.
We need reclamation.
Have scientists and geologists and people that are experienced and know how say, look, these are the studies and this is what the effects and this is why it matters, you know, and to be heard.
And it's being done in other states. The companies are still making good money. Okay, it's not like, you know, we implement some tighter regulations that they're going to go out of business and we're going to drive away all the jobs. We figure it's 2 to 3%. It might add 2 to 3 cents on, you know, on for every dollar of crushed rock, but that just gets passed along. And I don't think we're going to notice it much really in the scheme of things. And what we get on return is cleaner water, cleaner air, a better environment.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you'd like to say to wrap up? I've really enjoyed talking with you. I could talk with you for hours, to be honest with you, and get.
I enjoyed it. I will. Okay. I just wanted to point out these are flyers that are going out pretty soon because of the election, and I've circled Colette there. You're on the list. Realize out of the 17 people running here, 14 are women.
I know, right? Yes. And only 3, I guess. I'm the only person that's running in New Braunfels. Actually in New Braunfels. Comal, I think there's some more, but New Braunfels proper. But so, well, thank you for coming.
If your viewers,
go ahead.
If your viewers haven't gotten enough about the recharge zone, go look at the Edwards Aquifer website, but also go on to Stop 3009 Vulcan Quarry. We have a really good site there, and you can learn a lot about what's going on.
Yes, and I will when I post this online, I will post links to the Hill Country Environment. TRAM, is there a website for TRAM yet? And then
it's new, and I don't think they have as much as we do yet.
Okay, and then I'll put the Stop Vulcan Quarry one. And do you mind if do you mind if I put a way for people to contact you, or they could do that through the website?
Through the website would be fine.
Yeah, let's do that.
And I guess I should make a comment here because I'm doing this on a personal basis, so I'm not really representing this group, but I'm representing myself. We try to tend to stay apolitical because we need everyone
Right.
to support the environment. So I just make that disclosure right there if I can.
That's all right. Well, I appreciate it, Mr. Olivier.
Very good.
Correctly. And I want to thank you so much, and we'll continue to be in contact because just so the audience knows, he sends me all kinds of graphs and charts and data because I'm a bit of a data nerd and I love it. And so he's basically like my data crack. You know, he he sends me.
I'm the water guy.
Yep.
You call me the caveman.
Yep. Well,
Okay.
thank you for coming, and I really appreciate it. And if people in the audience have any questions, I'm sure they'll reach out, and we'll keep in touch during this process and see how the lawsuit goes and everything. And then, you know, what in the future, what can happen to protect our aquifer and our drinking water and our future water supply, as well as our native species. So thank you for the work that you do. And, you know, I know you.
Good luck in November.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay.